The reason we had Rachel Zegler on the docket is she's an asshole.
Man.
Hello, Disney. You're going to have to redo your film again because this woman is a pig and you fired Gina Carano for far less than this nonsense.
The latest remake of a classic Disney film that's about as beloved as a cockroach in a 5-star restaurant. Yes, I'm talking about the modern-day Snow White fiasco, where Megyn Kelly, a former heavyweight from Fox News, decided to weigh in, and Rachel Zegler, our newly minted Snow White, seemed to shovel her own cinematic grave with every interview.
I think it's fair to say that no one can stand the star of this movie.
One of the reasons why Rachel Zegler sticks around is she's got a beautiful voice and she has some talent. So I think that certainly helps her because she's a PR nightmare. I don't know how anyone would hire her.
If you haven't heard the drama swirling around Disney's ill-fated attempt at reviving Snow White, buckle up. We're about to break it all down with a dash of sarcasm, a sprinkle of disbelief, and a whole lot of tea. Let's get rolling because this meltdown has enough twists, turns, and facepalms to power the Disney monorail for a decade.
Who hates when I win? The winged victory came to the Louvre in pieces, and people still line up to see her.
Oh my God.
And I can only hope
What does that mean?
that despite my flaws, and despite my cracks and my breaks, and there are many of them, that at every premiere, and everything I do, people will wait in line to see.
Disney, sitting atop its legendary film vault like a dragon hoarding gold, said to itself, hey, what if we take Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the 1937 classic that basically built our entire empire, and update it for modern audiences? That'll be easy money, right? In theory, sure. We're talking about the first feature-length animated film in Hollywood history, a cultural cornerstone that has made grown men tear up. It's practically revered.
Now, one thing that is already universally known at this point by the general public is the fact that Disney is in full-on damage control mode.
But I think the movie bombed because it's bad.
If you get the casting right, follow the original's timeless charm, and add some tasteful modern twists, you have a recipe for a slam dunk that could rake in $1 zillion and keep Disneyland's turkey leg vendors happy until the apocalypse. But in Disney's infinite wisdom, they chose Rachel Zegler for the lead role.
This is truly, she has to go. I'm sorry, Disney. She has to go.
On paper, she's got the voice of an angel, can belt out show tunes that'll give you goosebumps, and she's fresh off working with Spielberg on West Side Story. Sounds golden, right? Except that the moment she opened her mouth about the 1937 Snow White, she made it sound like she was being forced at one point to star in a dusty relic that insults modern feminism. She kept calling the original outdated, weird, and basically worthless, like it's some old crocheted doily you find in your grandma's attic.
Neither of them make any sense for their roles. We've already covered how Rachel Zegler's a terrible choice for Snow White. Nothing about her says Snow White, and that's even leaving aside the fact that she openly detests the story, as she's said many times during this disastrous PR campaign. But Gal Gadot, who plays the Queen...
Well, that's not something you want to hear from the actress supposed to carry your $200+ million live-action reboot. Disney executives probably guzzled coffee by the gallon, trying to figure out how to keep this PR train from derailing.
But these guys at Disney, they're not that bright, they're not that smart, and we see that because they can't come up with any new IP. Why not write some new movies? You guys sit around, you have billions of dollars, they keep going back and rewriting the classic.
Cue Megyn Kelly, the polarizing media figure known for scorching takes, who steps in to say, Rachel Zegler is basically tanking Snow White. If you've lost Megyn Kelly, who is no stranger to stirring controversy, you might be in deeper trouble than you realize. Before you could say magic mirror, Megyn Kelly delivered a scathing review of Zegler's comments, essentially labeling the young actress as ungrateful.
It's just a total nightmare for the studios. So now she's trying to sell oh, I love Snow White. I love everything about the whole story. Here she is more recently trying to change the messaging. This is actually Wednesday.
Thank you so much for being here. And to see this is really emotional for me, so I'm going to try to not do that. I love her, and her superpower is her heart. It's nothing supernatural. It's something that all of us have. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy Snow White. Thank you, guys.
I'm sorry. That was acting. That's what that was.
Rachel kept insisting the original Snow White was all about some weird prince stalking her, that the story was cringe, and that the new version was 100% changed. She specifically hammered home that they removed that offensive love story and replaced it with a fierce, independent princess who's apparently more Xena, warrior princess, than sweet, gentle Snow White. Traditional fans felt that was basically an insult to the entire spirit of the Disney classic. Kelly, a mother who presumably has watched these animated classics 1,000 times, was outraged. And she wasn't alone. Social media lit up like the 4th of July. Suddenly, your friendly neighborhood film buffs were howling that the star of the show didn't even like the story she was starring in. One minute, Rachel Zegler is a new Disney darling singing on set. The next, she's basically the poster child for actors who won't shut up and do the job they were hired to do. Speaking of not shutting up, let's not forget that this meltdown was also stirred by none other than Peter Dinklage. Initially, he criticized Disney for rehashing outdated stereotypes by making another Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. He was basically like, "This is 2023. Why are we still telling the story of 7 dwarfs living in a cave?" This triggered Disney to pivot on a dime. Suddenly, the dwarfs were replaced, or at least overshadowed, by bizarre CGI magical creatures. And let's just say that the final images that leaked made people wonder if the studio had borrowed leftover CGI trolls from some defunct Lord of the Rings knockoff. Real actors with dwarfism, who rarely get mainstream roles, were furious that an opportunity for them to shine was overshadowed by the lofty demands of certain Hollywood critics. The blowback? Social media meltdown part 2. Fans were already peeved about Rachel's comments, and then they saw pictures of these subpar CGI creatures looking like they'd been rendered on a 1990s budget. Memes proliferated, mocking the magical creatures, the questionable makeup, and the overall aesthetic. Some argued that Disney probably should have stuck with real actors or found a clever, respectful way to incorporate the dwarfs. Instead, the final product looked like someone copy-pasted random fantasy characters into a fairy tale reboot. In the midst of all this, Disney pressed forward, like a gambler convinced the next roll of the dice would be lucky. Execs presumably insisted, "All press is good press," hoping to spin controversy into box office gold. But as the video I'm recapping and roasting points out, the public had other ideas. By the time the promotional interviews rolled out, Rachel Zegler had done enough damage to turn hardcore Disney fans into cynics. Even casual viewers had second thoughts about seeing a movie whose lead actress kept sneering at the very source material that gave it life. Tension was thicker than Magic Kingdom cotton candy. As watchers and analysts predicted, the film landed in theaters with a pathetic thud. Winning weekend numbers looked horrifying for Disney's bean counters. Families who usually line up in droves for big Disney releases were absent. The once unstoppable Disney brand was now an open target for memes mocking the wokeification of every cherished fairy tale and the bizarre shift away from the original's charm. Online, people threw out phrases like, "Not my Snow White," while others posted side-by-side comparisons of the original 1937 design with the new film's visually underwhelming approach. Let's talk about the pivot that made the entire thing even more cringe: Rachel Zegler's desperate backpedaling. In earlier interviews, she'd practically said she was doing the world a favor by fixing a 1930s relic. After the internet meltdown, though, you would have thought she'd always been the biggest Snow White fan in the world. With teary eyes and a trembling voice, she hopped onto interview after interview, claiming she was deeply honored to continue the legacy, that she truly admired the character's optimism, that it was always about Snow White's heart and inner fairness. She borderline recited the moral from the original film like it was part of her daily affirmations. Naturally, fans weren't buying it. The about-face felt more staged than a reality show confrontation. Overnight, she morphed from "Snow White is weird" to "I love her so much I might spontaneously burst into song." People on social media joked that Disney probably forced her into apology mode, threatening to freeze her contract in carbonite if she didn't become the #1 Snow White cheerleader. If we were to guess, the studio heads probably were not subtle when they told her she needed to do serious damage control, and quick. Now we come to Gal Gadot, Wonder Woman herself, cast as the evil queen. On paper, that might sound exciting. Gal is glamorous, carries star power, and has proven she can nail commanding roles. But fans immediately pointed out a glaring issue: the evil queen is supposed to be consumed by envy for Snow White's greater beauty. That conflict is the entire reason she tries to have her killed. Yet, in the eyes of many, Gal Gadot is at least on par, if not overshadowing, Zegler in the looks department. The result is a believability crisis. It's hard to watch the evil queen get huffy about the fairest of them all, when many viewers consider Gal Gadot the more striking presence. It's a fairy tale, sure, but even fairy tales need some internal logic. Coupled with the cringe factor of Zegler's interviews, the dynamic between the evil queen and Snow White was overshadowed by incessant chatter about how no one could suspend their disbelief enough to think that was the reason behind the queen's resentment. So that's strike number 2 in this adaptation's storyline. You can have magical mirrors, dwarfs turned CGI hybrids, and enchanted forests, but if your lead roles feel wrong, even the strongest special effects won't rescue the narrative. Okay, so after all the interviews, the memes, and the behind-the-scenes drama, the film finally dropped in theaters. The result? A meltdown so epic you'd think the entire Magic Kingdom had been set ablaze. Audiences were not impressed. Seemed like the majority of folks who paid good money to see the film left the theater annoyed, indifferent, or just plain bored. Box office analysts had a field day calling it one of Disney's biggest bombs in recent memory. Exact numbers varied from one media source to another, but the bottom line is that the film cost a pile of money. Some reports say around $200 million or more once marketing is factored in, and it wasn't coming close to recouping that in ticket sales. Where was the magical Disney synergy? You'd expect color-coded merchandise, big promotional tie-ins at Disney parks, and maybe a synergy with restaurants selling special Snow White treats. Instead, there was half-hearted marketing, overshadowed by the negative press swirling around Zegler's remarks, the dwarf's fiasco, and the weirdness of a storyline that gutted everything people loved about the original. This was meant to be a grand revival of a timeless tale. It crashed harder than a pumpkin carriage at midnight. One of the biggest takeaways is how fans felt genuinely disrespected. For decades, they've adored the 1937 Snow White as a testament to Walt Disney's pioneering vision. Sure, the story's old-fashioned, but that's part of the charm. Remakes can update certain elements without scorning the original. Yet here, from day one, the public was bombarded with Zegler's statements about how the classic was cringe, outdated, or in dire need of modernization. Perhaps if the film had delivered a mind-blowing reinterpretation that still kept the heart of the original, some fans would have forgiven the modernization. But the final product apparently had more in common with a subpar streaming flick than a lavish Disney reimagining. Simultaneously, Hollywood insiders started gossiping about how Rachel Zegler's antics could have serious career ramifications. Spielberg gave her a break, and the rumor mill suggests that bigwigs are questioning if it's worth the risk to cast her again in major projects. Directors, producers, and casting agents want a stable figure for a big-budget film, someone who can handle interviews with nuance and not scare away fans. When you cast an actress who actively insults the property she's working on, you're effectively shooting yourself in the foot. By the time the dust settled, everyone from film critics to casual moviegoers were left with the same sentiment. What was Disney thinking? Damage control? Disney tried. They released statements emphasizing the film's new direction, how it was more empowering for young girls, how it was an updated take for modern audiences. But by then, the genie was out of the lamp. Memes were unstoppable, picking apart everything from the footage of the dwarfs that leaked online, to the bizarre marketing materials featuring Rachel Zegler in a costume that didn't even look particularly Snow White-ish. Traditional Disney fans felt doubly betrayed because they saw the House of Mouse tampering with a beloved classic and seemingly punishing fans for criticizing it. Meanwhile, the comedic meltdown continued. Folks on social media compared this fiasco to the entire superhero-turned-flop phenomenon, saying Disney had become so enamored with political correctness and modernization that they'd lost the plot, quite literally. Some fans, less outraged but equally unimpressed, simply decided to skip the film, opting to rewatch the original for the umpteenth time. With diminishing box office returns on other remakes, like The Little Mermaid not exactly setting new records, Disney probably prayed Snow White would be a sure bet. Instead, it turned into an epic case study in how to alienate your core audience. So, what's the big takeaway, folks? This entire meltdown, from Rachel Zegler's baffling commentary to Disney's scramble to CGFA the dwarfs, shows us one glaring truth. If you're going to remake a beloved classic, don't trash it in public. Even if you have critiques, because let's face it, the 1937 film is old-fashioned, make sure you honor the elements that made it iconic in the first place. Respect the fans who've grown up with it. Tread carefully if you plan to flip the script. They call it the House of Mouse. But let's not forget that it was built on the back of one major success after another, starting with a certain princess who once sang, "Someday my prince will come." Rachel Zegler might be talented, but for many outraged watchers, the disrespect overshadowed anything good she brought to the table. Sure, she's got a fantastic set of pipes, her singing is solid. But in showbiz, especially with a behemoth brand like Disney, you do not want to sabotage your film's nostalgia factor. The moral of this messed up modern fairy tale? Sometimes the old ways still hold a bit of magic. And if you can't respect that, you might end up losing fans, profits, and even your own credibility faster than you can say, "Mirror, mirror on the wall." Now that the dust has cleared and the box office receipts are in, spoiler, they're lower than expected, everyone's pointing fingers. Some blame Rachel Zegler's off-putting interviews. Others say it was the dwarf's fiasco. Still more claim Disney should have stuck to the original story's heart without layering on misguided improvements. The end result is a cautionary tale for the entertainment industry. If your leading star essentially declares war on the original fanbase, you can't be too surprised when your project belly flops. Meanwhile, the entire fiasco has become a juicy piece of online gossip. Will Rachel Zegler keep getting roles at the same tier? Or will studios quietly decide that it's not worth the headache to hire someone who might deliver scorching takes on the film before it even premieres? And what about Disney? Are they learning anything from this or just crossing their fingers for the next big project to overshadow the Snow White meltdown? The word on the street says Disney might be rethinking future live-action remakes. Possibly. Who knows, maybe in a few years we'll get Snow White 2, We Swear We're Sorry. So that's the epic meltdown of a film that should have been a golden goose but ended up more like a goose that got plucked, stuffed, and served cold on a silver platter of public opinion. Disney and Rachel Zegler tried to salvage the fiasco, but the memes, the savage critiques, and the lukewarm box office performance point to one big lesson. You can't outsmart decades of nostalgia, nor can you dismiss a cherished story and expect fans to line up for tickets. Now, the real question is, how does Disney move forward? Will they vow never again to belittle their own legacy, or will they keep churning out modernized remakes that spark controversies, overshadowing the escapist magic people actually crave from their fairy tales? And that's the final sip for today, folks. If you enjoyed this glorious train wreck of Hollywood arrogance and fairy tale blunders, don't be shy. Hit that like button, tap subscribe, and ring that notification bell for more blistering hot tea. Because in the realm of celebrity news, we don't hold back, especially when the meltdown is this entertaining.